بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد, all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the beneficent, the merciful, and salutations to his servant and messenger Muhammad ibn Abdullah, to his family, companions, and all those who follow them until the day of judgment. My brothers and sisters in Islam, we are on the second lesson of the kitab known as Mulakhas Al-Fiqh, the Shaykh Salih Al-Fiqh, the summarized Islamic jurisprudence. And last week we started with the introduction of the Shaykh, and we said that this book that we have in front of us, known as Mulakhas Al-Fiqh, was summarized from which book? Al-Rawd Al-Murbi'. And Rawd Al-Murbi' is the sharh of which kitab? Zad Al-Mustaqni'. So this book is summarized version of the kitab known as Rawd Al-Murbi'. After that, the Shaykh explained and talked about the benefits and the importance of seeking knowledge. And he mentioned the hadith of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where he said, "Man yuridillah bihi khayran yufaqihu fi din." Whoever Allah wants khair for them, Allah makes them comprehend the matters of the deen. In that, the Shaykh said people are of three types when it comes to knowledge. Who was the first group? Those who combine useful knowledge with correct action. And the second group of people in terms of knowledge are those who have no knowledge and come with the wrong deeds. And the third are those who have the knowledge but they don't come with the action. And all these three categories of people, the Shaykh said the evidence for it is what? And it is, for the first group, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, and whom are those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favored? من النبيين والشهداء وحسن أولئك رفيقا. Those are the ones who have combined good deeds with the correct knowledge. And the second category, those who have the knowledge, or those who act without knowledge. They have no knowledge but they come with the deeds. What is the evidence for them? Those are what? Those who have the knowledge. Maghdubi alayhim are those who have the knowledge but they don't come with the deeds. Those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anger is upon are those who have the knowledge but they don't act upon it. And ad-dallin are whom? Those who act without knowledge. After that short introduction, the Shaykh went and we spoke about that we're going to be starting the book known as Tahara, purification. The book of purification. Why do the scholars start with the book of purification when it comes to the books of fiqh? What do we say? Because Aqidah deals with the Shahadatayn, and the fiqh is what is after it. And the first thing that you will be asked on the day of judgment will be Salah, which is the second pillar of Islam. So as such, what is the link? Salah and Tahara. Because it is a shart. Min shurud Salah is purification, Tahara. And as such, Tahara becomes the first thing that we speak of when it comes to fiqh. And in all books of fiqh you will find this. And then after that we find in terms of tahara, what is the first thing that is spoken of? Ma. Why? Because water is the first thing that you require for you to purify yourself with. And in that the Shaykh, from that point of view, started the book, and he says, وَقَرْضُنَا الْآنِ بَيَانُ صِفَةُ الْمَاءِ الَّذِي يَحْصُلُ بِهِ تَطَهُّرُ وَالْمَاءِ الَّذِي لَا يَحْصُلُ بِهِ. So here the Shaykh started by explaining to us the water in which purification can be achieved by, and the water that purification cannot be achieved by. How many types of water are there? Two. The first is what? Pure water. And the second is water that is impure, najis. The pure water, an example of it is rain, sea, river, any water that stays in the form that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. And the water that is considered to be najis is what? Water that has changed either the smell, the taste, or the color by something impure falling on it. So if one of those three things changes, then that water is considered to be najis and cannot be used for purification. After that, the Shaykh went and spoke of باب في أحكام الآنية والثياب الكفار, chapter regarding utensils and ثياب الكفار, the clothing of the disbelievers. Why this topic now? We just spoke of water, and we said that what is the link aniya with purification and with ma? Barakallah fiqh, because aniya is required to carry the water like jugs so that you can use for wudu. In this the Shaykh said what? Al-aslu fil aniyati wa thiyabi what? What is the original stance? Al-ibaha, that it is halal. And then the Shaykh istithna, he exempt from that rule two things. What are they? Gold and silver, number one. And the second thing, skin, the dead animal. What is the hukum of it? That it is haram to use it as utensil. You cannot use it for anything that is from what? Eating or drinking. It's haram. And qiyasan ala hada, the scholars they say what? You cannot use it for anything that is itikhar, to carry water, and for other uses as well. If you cannot eat with it and you cannot drink by it, then you cannot use it for other things from that. When it comes to utensils, you can only use that which has been what? Gold or silver has been used to mend it, fix it. The second thing, in terms of the skin of dead animals, what's the hukum of it? It is what? Najis, haram, except it has been tanned, been dried, and been fixed. And the thiyab al-kuffar, what's the hukum? Al-asl is tahar. It is allowed for you to use them and to wear their clothing, because the Rasul and his companions used their utensils and wore the clothing that they made. The only exemption is what? If you notice or you know najasa, be sure. Inshallah, we'll start the second lesson now. Barakallahu feekum. The second lesson, the title, باب فيما يحرم على المحدث مزاولته من الأعمال. Chapter, that which is haram for the person who is in a state of hadath, for them to do from actions. Previously, in the previous lesson, we mentioned what hadath means. What does hadath mean? تعريف. What is it again? تعريف الشرعي. ما معنى الحدث? What is hadath mean? Ritual impurity. Ritual impurity. And in such, the Shaykh here says, فيما يحرم على المحدث, that which is haram for the person who is in a state of ritual impurity, meaning a person who requires wudu or ghusl. So now what we're going to be talking about, it is what is haram, those things that are haram for a person who requires wudu or requires ghusl. The Shaykh says, هناك بعض من الأعمال التي يحرم على المسلم إذا لم يكن على طهارة. There are things which are haram for the believer if he or she is not in a state of purification. The Shaykh says here, اعلم يا أخي أن هناك أشياء تحرم على المحدث. Know, oh my brother, there are matters that are haram for a person who is in a state of impurity. سواء كان حدثه أكبر أو أصغر. Whether his hadath, ritual impurity, is either major or minor. Major meaning what? He requires ghusl, and minor meaning he requires wudu. وهناك, and also there are أشياء يختص تحريمها بمن هو محدث حدثا أكبر. There are matters that are only specifically haram for a person who is in a state of major impurity. Remember, he says, there are matters, number one, there are certain actions that are haram for anyone who in a state of hadath, whether that hadath is major or minor, whether you require wudu or ghusl. There are things which you are not allowed to do. That's one. Two, there are things a person who in a state of hadathul asqar is allowed, but a person who is in a state of hadathul akbar, major impurity, is not allowed. The Shaykh says, فالأشياء التي تحرم على المحدث أي الحدثين. Those things that are haram for a person who is in a state of hadath, ritual impurity, whether he requires wudu or ghusl. If you are in a state of hadath, the following things are haram for you. If you need wudu or you need ghusl, no matter, as long as you're not in complete purification, the following matters are haram for you. Number one, massul mushafi. Massul mushaf, touching the mushaf. Touching the mushaf, touching it with your hands, touching it is haram. فلا يمسه المحدث بدون حائل. A person who is in a state of hadath does not touch it without there being protection between the mushaf and his or her skin. You can turn it with a stick or while you're wearing gloves or another piece of material. لقوله تعالى, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يمسه إلا المتطهرون, and they don't touch it except those who are in purification. مطهرون إلا مطهرون, except those who are in purification. أي الحدثين, whether it is akbar, whether you require wudu or ghusl, you're not allowed to touch the mushaf. لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. أي المتطهرون من الحدث جنابة أو غيرها, those who are purified from janaba or other than it. So this one. And the Shaykh continues and he says, على القول بأن المراد بهم المطهرون من البشر. If we take the meaning that mutahharun, what is meant here is the human being, then you're not allowed to touch it. وهناك من يرى أن المراد بهم الملائكة الكرام. But there are those among the scholars who see that the ayah is actually referring to the angels. The angels. And then the Shaykh continues, he says, وحتى لو فسرت الآية بأن المراد بهم الملائكة, even if the ayah was translated that the meaning, what is meant in this ayah, and the ayah is referring to the angels, فإن ذلك يتناول البشر بالدلالة الإرشاد. نعم, إشارة. That the ayah also takes to account the human being by the general meaning, and also that it has been narrated in the hadith, وكما ورد في الكتاب الذي كتبه الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم, the paper that Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم wrote لعمر بن حزم, قوله لا يمس المصحف إلا الطاهر. The Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم says in this hadith narrated by Nisai that none touch it except a person who is pure, in a state of purification. So that is the first thing. That is the first thing. Brothers, all four madahibs, all four scholars of the four major madhabs, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmed, Imam Malik, all of them are in agreement that you don't touch the mushaf unless you are in a state of wudu. You don't touch the mushaf unless you are in a state of wudu. And whoever needs this can go back to Majmu' al-Fatawa, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. Awra? Inshallah, we'll come to that bi'idhnillah. Thanks for it's not, you're not in a state of hadad then. The awra is showing. Okay. The second thing that is haram for a person who is in a state of impurity. ويحرم على if the individual is able to purify himself. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. This ayah, Allah فَطَهَّرُوا. And if you're in a state of janaba, then purify yourself, i.e. make ghusl. Likewise, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, لا يقبل الله صلاة بغير طهور. Allah does not accept the salah of an individual except in a state of purification. And this is clear. So no salah. Salah becomes haram for a person who is in a state of hadath, is in a state of impurity. The Shaykh continues and says, فلا يجوز له أن يصلي من غير طهارة مع قدرة عليها. It is not allowed for him to pray having the ability to make tahara. ولا تصح صلاته, and his salah will not be accepted. سواء كان جاهلا أو عالما, whether you forgot to make wudu, you forgot that you had purification, or you knew and you did it purposely. Doesn't matter. If you find out today, now, that yesterday dhuhr you prayed without wudu, that salah you still owe. You have to make up salatul dhuhr straight away. You have to go and pray salatul dhuhr straight away. And the Shaykh says, لكن العالم العامد إذا صلى من غير طهارة, whoever prays knowing that he is not in a state of purification and he does it purposely, then he is athim, he is committing a sin. And the opposite is the jahil, the person who does it. Both their actions are not accepted, but one will be sinning for doing purposely, and the other who is doing out of jahl, he is not sinning, but still he is required to repeat the action. Number 3, يحرم على المحدث الطواف بالبيت العتيق. That it is haram for a person who requires ghusl or wudu, who is in a state of hadath, to make tawaf حول الكعبة, to make tawaf circumambulate around the Kaaba. As the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, الطواف بالبيت صلاة. That making tawaf around the Kaaba is like a salah. إلا أن الله أباح فيه الكلام, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated speech within it. It's like salah, and it takes the ahkam, the salah, meaning wudu, is required. The only difference is that you can talk to your friend and so on. Is haram for anyone who is in a state of hadath, impurity. And then the Shaykh, and he says, وَأَمَّا التي تحرم على المحدث حدثا أكبر خاصة. Now he's going to explain those things that are haram for the person who is in a state of major impurity only. So the following matters are only haram for the person who is in a state of requiring ghusl, requiring major purification. So the following matters are not haram for a person who requires wudu, but rather they are haram for a person who is requiring ghusl. Number 1, يحرم على المحدث حدثا أكبر قراءة the Quran, to read the Quran, whether it is from memory or from the Mus'haf, from a piece of paper. It is haram. And the proof of this is the hadith of Ali radiallahu anhu. لا يحجبه أي يعني النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Nothing stands in the way. Nothing stops the Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم عن القرآن from the Quran شيء anything ليس الجنابة except janaba. The only time the Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم did not recite the Quran is when he is صلى الله عليه وسلم or he was in a state of janaba, major impurity, in a state of requiring ghusl, in a state of major hadath. In another narration in Tirmidhi, يقرئنا القرآن ما لم يكن جنبا. He used to recite the Quran to us if he was not in a state of janaba. فهذا يدل على تحريم القراءة القرآن على الجنب. And this indicates that it is haram for a person who is in a state of janaba to read the Quran. And the Shaykh continues, says, وبمعناه الحائض ونفساء. And also قياسا on this, women who are menstruating or who are on their postnatal bleeding are likewise not allowed to read the Quran. Then Shaykh says, ولكن, but رخص بعض العلماء, some of the scholars يعني gave the women فرصة or chance, they exempt them, like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. للحائض أن تقرأ القرآن إذا خشيت النسيان. For the woman who is menstruating or postnatal bleeding, for her to read her Quran if she fears that she will forget. لا, قلنا من البداية مس المصحف لا يجوز. مس المصحف حتى ولو even the one who requires wudu, it is not allowed. الآن we're talking about, نحن نتكلم عن قراءة القرآن. قراءة القرآن يجوز لمن يحتاج أو لمن على الحدث الأصغر فقط. If you are on حدث الأصغر, if you require minor impurity, you are in a state of minor impurification, you require wudu, you're not allowed to touch the Quran directly, but you can read the Quran from the Mus'haf as well as from memory. You don't need to make wudu for that. But if you are in a state of Hadathul Akbar, you're not allowed to touch the Mus'haf as well as reading it from memory as well as from the Mus'haf. So this is for a person who is in a state of janaba, it is ijma'. For a person who is, or a sister who is menstruating or on her postnatal bleeding, the Shaykh says what? That only women who are exempt are those who fear that they will forget. خشية نسيان. And this is the right of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And even Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi on this issue, not only Shaykh al-Islam but Imam Malik, Nawawi, Bukhari, Tabari, Abu Dawood, Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam al-Haramain, Ghazali, all of them had this opinion. They took this opinion that the woman is allowed to read the Quran. But Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Uthaymin rahmatullahi alayhi also says that because the issue there is khilaf in the mas'ala, it is better for the sister to leave and not to read the Quran unless she purifies herself. But if she was a person who is a student or a teacher and fears because of the length of the time that she will forget, then she's allowed. But sometimes the shaitan might come to a sister who doesn't normally read the Quran and the only time he comes to her, tells her to read the Quran when she is in a state of janaba, in the state of عفوا يعني حيض, and menstruating. The second thing that is haram for a person who is in a state of حدث الأكبر, the Shaykh says, ويحرم على المحدث حدثا أكبر من جنابة أو حيض أو نفاس اللبث في المسجد بغير وضوء. That a person who is in a state of janaba or menstruating or on her postnatal bleeding, it is haram for them to stay in the masjid. It is haram for them to stay in the masjid بغير wudu, without wudu. Meaning those who are allowed to make wudu, and those who are allowed to make wudu are the ones who are in a state of janaba, not hayd and nafas. But the person who is in a state of janaba, is allowed or she is allowed to make wudu and sit in the masjid, stay in the masjid, sleep in the masjid, but still not allowed to read the Quran or pray salah, but they are allowed to stay in the masjid. But all of them, anyone in a state of Hadath al-Akbar is allowed to walk past the masjid from one door to another, or to get something and out again. So it's not about entrance, it's about staying. It's not about entering the masjid, but rather it's about staying in the masjid. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا, O you who believe, لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى, do not come to the salah, come to pray while you're in a state of intoxication. حتى تعلموا ما تقولون, until you know what you are saying. ولا جنبا إلا عابر السبيل, except, and also while you're in a state of janaba, except if you are passing through. حتى تغتسلوا, until you purify yourselves by making ghusl. And then Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam also says, لا أحل المسجد لحائض ولا جنوب. Don't make the masjid halal, to stay for a person or sister who is menstruating, or a person who is in a state of janaba. Hadith Aisha radiallahu anha. And the Shaykh he says, فإذا توضأ من عليه حدث أكبر. If a person who is in a state of Hadath al-Akbar makes wudu, جاز له اللبث في المسجد, it is allowed for him to stay in the masjid. The Hadath al-Akbar, who is he referring to? Who is allowed to make wudu here? Who is he referring to? A person who is in a state of janaba, not hayd. A sister who is menstruating, she is not allowed to stay in the masjid aslan, sit in the masjid. She is not allowed at all. And the proof of this is the hadith of the Rasulullah sallam, Ada radiallahu anhu, he says, رَأَيْتُ رِجَالًا مِنْ أَصْحَابِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. Ada is saying, I have seen men from the companions of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, يَجْلِسُونَ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ, sitting in the masjid, وَهُمْ مُجْنِبُونَ, while they were in a state of janaba. إِذَا تَوَضَّأُوا, when they make wudu, wudu as-salati, like the wudu of the salah. So they make wudu like the wudu of the salah. Is that clear, brothers and sisters? So we said, brother, I think, start, you had a question? Yeah, I was going to ask you, no. Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah? The brother, he asked a question, he says, when Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says that it is allowed for a sister who is menstruating or postnatal bleeding if she is fearful of forgetting to read the Quran, that she's allowed to read the Quran. What evidence, what's the proof, what's the dalil? And the dalil of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, unlike other mashayikh also that we mentioned, is the lack of evidence. There is no evidence to disallow the sisters from reading the Quran. The argument that Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah uses, he says, is that this issue is a major issue. And there were women around the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his daughters and his wives. And there were women around who were the wives of the companions. Is it likely that such an important matter was not transmitted to us, that it is not allowed for a woman to read the Quran, this major issue? It is not an issue that we can use qiyas of. So the lack of evidence itself is an evidence that she is allowed. And Ibn Uthaymeen rahmatullahi alayhi also says likewise. But خروجا عن الخلاف, to go out from the khilaf, madam some of the scholars are using the hadith of janaba as a qiyas, as an analogy, as a proof, to get out of this khilaf, it is better for a sister who is menstruating to keep away from this and to only read it if it is necessary. This is in terms of the Quran we are talking about here, is qira'ah from the mushaf or qira'ah from the memory. We're not talking about ayat that are read in terms of as adkar or as dua. If you read certain verses in your sleep and so on, when you go to bed, ma'udatayn and so on, you are allowed to read them, because you're reading them not as a Quran but as a adkar, as an adkar. Na'am. Listens to it. Did we mention listen to it? In terms of what we mentioned, remember we mentioned 3 things that are haram for a person who is in a state of any hadith. What were they? Touching the mushaf. Number 2, salah, whether it's fard or sunnah. 3, tawaf, al-Kaaba. And then we mentioned 2 things that are haram for a person who is in a state of major impurity, and they are reciting the Quran, and 2, staying in the masjid. Where did we get from? Listening to the mushaf. And you can listen to the Quran. Na'am ya akhi. Yeah. That's even the scholars, they say that Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he ordered those women who come out to the musalla of Eid for them to go out, not to be among the people who are praying, to sit separate. And this is musalla outside, where the salah is performed once a year or maximum 2 times a year, the place that the salah is being prayed upon. So if that is the case, what about a masjid? And if they are not allowed to be in the Masjid al-Haram to make tawaf or to sit, and the Rasul did not allow, then our masajid is even awla. So the women are not allowed to stay in the masjid while they are in a state of inshallah. The brother says questions, leave it to the end. Barakallahu feek. Yes. And bi'idhnillah, we'll quickly go through the next chapter. Bab fi adabi qada'i al-haja. Chapter in relieving yourself or going to the toilet. The Shaykh says, اعلم, know, وفقني الله وإياك, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq in this, وجميع المسلمين, and all of the Muslims, أن ديننا كامل متكامل. That our religion is a complete religion. ما ترك شيئا مما يحتاجه الناس في دينهم. It has not left anything that the people require in terms of their deen ودنياهم and for their worldly gain. إلا بينه, except that it clarified. ومن ذلك, and from this matters is آداب قضاء الحاجة, is the manners how a person relieves themselves. The Shaykh now is going to tell us how one goes to the toilet. This is the adab that we took from our deen. So he says, فَإِذَا أَرَادَ الْمُسْلِمُ دُخُولَ الْخَلَاءِ, if the Muslim intends to enter the toilet, وَهُوَ الْمَحَلُّ الْمُعَدُّ لِقَضَاءِ الْحَاجَةِ, and it is a place where this has been made for this purpose. It's a toilet for the people to go and relieve themselves. If an individual tries to enter this kind of place, فَإِنَّهُ يُسْتَحَبُّ لَهُ, it is mustahab, preferred, that the individual أن يقول, to say Bismillah, for them to say Bismillah, أعوذ بالله من الخبث والخبائث, by the name of Allah I seek the protection of Allah, من الخبث والخبائث, from the khubth and the khaba'ith, i.e. some of the scholars they say it is the male and female jinns. ويقدم رجله اليسرى حال الدخول, and you put your left leg first when you are entering. وعند الخروج يقدم رجله اليمنى, and when you are coming out you take out and you bring out your right leg. So when you are going in, your left leg goes in, and when you are coming out, your right leg comes out first. وَيَقُولُ, and he says, when you come out, the individual says, غُفْرَانَكَ, غُفْرَانَكَ, oh Allah, forgive me. الحمد لله الذي أذهب عني الأذى وعافاني. Praise be to Allah, the one who has taken this harm away from me, وعافاني, and gave me health. And then the Shaykh continues, says, وذلك لأن اليمنى تستعمل فيما من شأنه التكريم وتجميل. Because that the right is used for anything that there is honor and good and beauty. واليسرى تستعمل فيما من شأنه إزالة الأذى, and the left is used for anything in terms of removing the najasa and harm. Some of the scholars they say regarding the person when he says غفرانك, what is the hikmah behind it? What is the hikmah? Because, barakallahu fiqh, some of the scholars they say the hikmah behind it is that a person when he goes into the toilet is not allowed to mention the names and to do dhikr, to the extent that some of the salaf they used to put pebbles between their teeth to stop themselves from saying the dhikr, because their tongue got used to saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. They could not stop, so they used to put pebbles in between their teeth when they go to the toilet to stop themselves, subhanallah. This is how much they said it, and the body got used to. So they say the person says غفرانك because in that period of time while he was relieving himself he did not remember Allah. So he says, oh Allah, forgive me, for I have not honored you, I have not remembered you, and I have not mentioned and raised your name, your most honored name. All the scholars, they say the hikmah behind it is that the individual realizes the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon him, which he was not grateful. Just imagine, they say. The individual, how easy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it for him, for his body to communicate to one another. To say, you need a toilet. For you to feel something. For you to get certain signal in your brain to tell you, you need a toilet. So do you start looking for the toilet. And then when that issue progresses more, the signals get stronger and stronger. And when you go and you relieve yourself, you feel the ni'mah and the pleasure and the relief of actually relieving yourself. Just imagine if you did not have this ability. This ability, and some people, they cannot urinate. The urinate blocked. Some people are incontinent. It just flows. Some people, their stomach in constipation. They eat tablets to move and to get what is in their stomachs out. Just imagine if this continues for weeks and months. حاجته في قضاء في فضاء. He intends to relieve himself in outside, in a place where there is no toilet. Previous in a place, go with your family. Some people go to the Peak District nowadays and whatever, and you might find yourself there's no toilet, and all you can see is just no man's land. In that kind of environment, how does one relieve himself? The Shaykh says, فَإِنَّهُ يُسْتَحَبُّ لَهُ أَنْ يَبْعُدَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. Number one, it is desirable that the individual goes far away from the people, that you hide your aura, that you should not be seen. بحيث يكون في مكان خالٍ, that he is in a place that is empty for people. ويستتر عن الأنظار بحائط أو شجرة أو غير ذلك, and you hide behind something. You don't go and then just sit anywhere. You go behind a tree, behind a wall, behind something, so the people don't see you. ويحرم أن يستقبل القبلة أو يستدبرها, and it is haram for him to face the qibla or turn his back on the qibla حال قضاء الحاجة, while one is relieving himself. بل ينحرف عنها, but he turns sideways. And the Shaykh says, لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى عن استقبال القبلة واستدبارها. The Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم forbade facing the qibla or turning one's back towards the qibla حال قضاء حاجة, while one relieving himself. And that's the hadith which in Bukhari and Muslim, where the Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم says, إذا أتيتم الغائضة فلا تستقبلوا القبلة ولا تستدبروها ولكن شرقوا أو غربوا. If you go and relieve yourselves, the hadith is not in your book, then don't turn your back towards it and don't face it, but rather you face towards the east or the west. Splat, that when if you urinate in a hard surface, you get splat, you get splashbacks. So as such, in this rashash, you need to be aware of that. And yusiba badanahu aw thawbahu, you be careful that it doesn't touch your body or your thawb. And this includes sometimes when you sit on the English style toilet seats, sometimes the water is low. The water is low. So when you sit on it, sometimes that you get the splashback. You get that splashback on your body. So you need to be careful. One, do something about it. Prepare in the first place, was putting tissue in there. Or sometimes also you can actually regulate the water, the height of the water in your toilet seat. That you can bring it up so that it reduces the level of splashbacks. And this is what you get in Saudi Arabia. The water is high in the toilets. When you sit on them, actually there is no splash whatsoever. And then the Shaykh continues and he says, وَلَا يَجُوزُ لَهُ أَن يَمَّسَ فَرْجَهُ بِيَمِينِ, that it is not allowed for you to touch your private parts with your right hand. وَكَذَلِكَ لَا يَجُوزُ لَهُ أَن يَقْضِي حَاجَتَهُ عَنْ طَرِيقِ النَّاسِ. Likewise, it is not allowed for you to relieve yourselves in the path of people. أَوْ فِي ظِلِّهِمْ, or somewhere they use for shadow. أَوْ مَوَارِدِ مِيَائِهِمْ, or where they collect their water from. لِلنَّهْيِ النَّبِيِّ عَنْ ذَلِكَ, because the Rasul ﷺ forbade all of that. لِمَا فِيهِ مِنَ الْإِضْضِرَارِ بِالنَّاسِ وَأَذِيَّتِهِمْ, and because this will bring about harm upon the people. The Rasul ﷺ says, لا يمسكن أحدكم ذكره بيمينه. None of you should touch his private part with his right hand. وهو يبول, while you are urinating. ولا يتمسح من الخلاء بيمينه. Nor do you wipe yourself with your right hand. This hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. And then the Shaykh says, وَلَا يَنْبَغِي لَهُ أَنْ يَتَكَلَّمَ حَالَ قَضَاءِ الْحَاجِ. And it is not allowed also for you to talk while you are relieving yourself. فَقَدْ وَرَدَ فِي الْحَدِيثِ, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the hadith, أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَمْغُتُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is upset by that. Allah does not like that. وَيَحْرُمُ عَلَيْهِ قِرَاءَةُ الْقُرْآنِ. Likewise, it is haram for you to read the Quran while you are in that state. فإذا فرغ, and if the individual, when he finishes relieving himself, من قضاء الحاجة, فإنه ينظف المخرج بالاستنجاء بالماء أو الاستجمار بالأحجار أو ما يقوم مقامها. The individual, when he relieves himself, he washes himself and makes istinja or istijmar. Remember, we mentioned certain ahkam. So far what we said is that the individual goes to the toilet, that he says Bismillah. This hadith is in Tirmidhi. The hadith is da'if, but lahu shawahid, there are other hadith, and this hadith then becomes sahih لغيره because of the kathra. There's a lot more hadith that mention this. They're not all of them sahih, but they support one another. So this is say Bismillah, A'udhu Billah min al-khubthi wal-khaba'ith. And then you put your left leg first and while you're in there, you don't talk, you don't read Quran. If it's possible, then you don't face the Qibla. Toilets are made like that. Sometimes in this country, it might not be the case. If you are outside, then you must go far away from the people. You must not urinate in a place where people use a shadow or a route that the people use for a pathway, or a place where people collect their water from. All of these places are haram. Likewise, when you're in the toilet and you're sitting there or you're doing whatever what you need to do, make sure that the najasa does not splash back on your body or on your clothing. This is also haram. As the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned that one of the people who are adab al-qabr is what? Because they do not used to protect themselves from najasa when they urinate. When you are cleaning yourself, then you use your left hand. You don't grab your right hand with your private part when you're urinating, and you don't wipe yourself with your right hand either, but you wipe it and you grab your private parts with your left hand. When you do that and you're washing yourself or cleaning yourself, purifying yourself, then you either do istijmar or istinja. Istinja is with water. Istinja is with water. Or istijmar. And istijmar is previously there was no toilet papers. People used to use pebbles and leaves and so on. But nowadays we've got toilet papers, and toilet papers take the place of that. So you can use istijmar with a toilet paper. You can do one of the two. You can either use istinja with water, or you can use istijmar, toilet paper, without using the water. Without using the water. But to combine the two is better. Combine the two is better. And as such, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He praised the people of Masjid Quba, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فيه رجال يحبون أن يتطهروا والله يحب المتطهرين. There are men who like to purify themselves. فيه رجال يحبون أن يتطهروا والله يحب المطهرين. And Allah loves those who purify themselves. In this ayah, the people of Masjid Quba, they were asked, why? What do you do? And they said, we combine istijmar and istinja. Inna nutbi'u al-hijarata al-ma. That we follow the pebbles with water. We do istijmar and then we use water. So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is the most preferable. And Allah has praised the people of Quba that you use toilet paper and then you use water. But if you want to just limit yourself to istijmar, just imagine if you're in the town, in a public place, far away, there's no bottles, there's no nothing, and you're in the toilet, all you have is access to toilet paper. In this case, you are allowed to use this only. And the Shaykh says, وَيُشْتَرَطْ, and the condition is ثَلَاثُ مَسَحَاتٍ, the 3 wipes, munaqiyah, that wipe away, that absorb, فَأَكْثَرْ, or more than 3, إذا أراد الزيادة, if you require. There's minimum of 3 wipes. Minimum of 3 wipes. So again, you are allowed to do istinja And istinja is with what? With water. And istijmar is with paper nowadays. Which one is preferable? That you use, combine the two. But either one by itself is what? Sufficient. If you're using istijmar, then you what? Three times minimum or more. 3 times. Some of the scholars, they say, the Shaykh continues, says, قال بعض الفقهاء. Some of the scholars of fiqh, they say, إن الاستنجاء أو الاستجمار. That istinja or istijmar شرط من شروط صحة الوضوء. That it is a condition of the conditions of the wudu. صحة الوضوء. For your wudu to be correct, you must make istinja or istijmar. لا بد أن يسبقه. That it is must that this precedes it. So some of the scholars, they say, remember, I have to understand this. Some of the scholars say that إن الاستنجاء أو الاستجمار شرط من شروط صحة الوضوء. It is a condition of the conditions of your wudu being correct. Correctness of your wudu. And they say, لا بد أن يسبقه. That it is a must that you make istinja or istijmar before you make wudu. For instance, a person goes to the toilet, relieves themselves, and then he did not make istinja or istijmar. He comes out, goes to the sink, and he starts to make wudu. When he makes the wudu, he remembers that he did not make istinja or istijmar. In this case, what does he do? Does he make istinja and istijmar and his wudu will be correct? No. Here, this is what this scholar says. لا بد أن يسبقه. That it is a must that the istijmar or istinja goes before. فلو توضأ قبله. If he was to make wudu before, لم يصح wudu. لم يصح وضوءه. That his wudu will not be correct. لحديث المقداد المتفق عليه. The hadith of Miqdad رضي الله عنه, that it is agreed upon. يغسل ذكره ويتوضأ. He washes his private part and then he makes. Imam Nawawi says, والسنة, from the hadi of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أن يستنجي قبل الوضوء. That you make istinja before the wudu, not make wudu and then you make istinja. ليخرج من الخلاف ويأمن نعم انتقاض ظهره. And that the individual goes out of khilaf and that he is certain of his purification. And then the Shaykh says, ending with this topic, he says, وَهُنَا أَمْرٌ يَجِبُ التَّنْبِيهُ عَلَيْهِ. And here there is a matter that is a must for us to bring to your attention. وهو أن بعض العوام يظن أن الاستنجاء من الوضوء. That some of the people think that istinja, making istinja, is part of the wudu. فإذا أراد أن يتوضأ. So whenever they want to make wudu, بدأ بالاستنجاء. They have to go and make istinja. ولو كان قد استنجى سابقا بعد قضاء الحاجة. Even if that individual has already made istinja. So imagine the individual went to the toilet and he made istinja in his house, and then 3 hours later he comes and you wash your private parts and then come out, and you will see this quite a lot in our Asian brothers. They do this. The Asian brothers, this is what they do. Every time they come to the mosque, The first thing they do if they need to make wudu is go to the toilet. Not that they need a toilet, but just to make istinja. وهذا خطأ, and this is wrong. لأن الاستنجاء ليس من الوضوء, because istinja is not from the wudu. وإنما هو من شروطه, but it is from its conditions. كما سبق, like we explained before. نعم. ومحله بعد الفراغ من قضاء الحاجة, and its place is after you relieve yourself. ولا داعي لتكراره من غير وجود موجب, and there is no need for you to repeat it if there is no need for you to do that. إن شاء الله بإذن الله والأندى بإذن الله. سبحانك الله وبحمدك وتبارك اسمك وتعالى جل وعلا لا غير. نعم نعم.
يرفع الدعاء مثل استغفر الله استغفر الله، هو يقول سبحان الله سبحان الله الذي ذكرت بعد الصلاة.
The brother asks regarding question regarding sometimes what we hear in terms of the adhkar بعد الصلوات المكتوبة, the adhkar that is said after the 5 daily prayers. Sometimes we hear the tasbih and tahleel and the tahmeed or the takbir. Is it allowed for you to raise your voice, or should you do it quietly? There's a hadith of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu, narrated in Bukhari. He says, أن الرفع الصوت بالذكر حين ينصرف الناس من المكتوبة كان على عهد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. أن الرفع الصوت, raising your voice, بالذكر, with the dhikr adhkar after the salah, حين ينصرف, when the people leave and they finish their salah, when the people say السلام عليكم السلام عليكم من المكتوبة, from the obligatory salahs, كان على عهد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. This was the way at the time of the Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. Also Abdullah ibn Abbas رضي الله عنه says, كنت أعرف انقضاء الصلاة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بالتكبير, that I used to know that the Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم completed his salah by the takbir that the Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم said, i.e. by me hearing his takbir, I knew that the salah is finished. So this is the hadith. Shaykh says, ويستحب الجهر بالتهليل والتسبيح والتحميد والتكبير عقب الصلاة. It is mustahab for you to raise your voice using this evidence after the salah with tasbih, tahmeed, takbir. Shaykh Al-Albani rahmatullahi alayhi says regarding this issue, clear that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum used to do this, and the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did this. Shaykh Al-Albani likewise says, and Imam Uthaymeen rahmatullahi alayhi times, and this one is saying Subhanallah, and this one is saying Allahu Akbar, and this one is saying this, and it's going to be confused and tashfish, he says. So he says the asal is that the individual does it to himself in a sound that he hears, and maximum the person who is sitting beside him, not on the other side of the masjid. So this is in terms of what رفع الصوت means. نعم. clear؟ فهمتم؟ يعني أصله في سر يجوز يستحب، ولكن يكون حراما إذا كان الرفع الصوت يؤدي إلى تشويش، يشوش على الآخرين، لأن يكون لا يجوز، لابد أن تخفض صوتك. نعم. إياك.
كيف تقرأ المرأة الحائضة هل تنص مصحف أم للقراءة عن غيرها؟
المرأة حائضة تمسح المصحف، تم يعني لا، ايش قلنا من قبل؟ لا يجوز، لا يجوز. It is not allowed for a person who is in a state of hadath, whether it is required in wudu or in a state of janab, for them to touch the mushaf. إذا كان المرأة, if she's wearing gloves, then in that case she can carry the mushaf. If she's wearing gloves, in that case she can carry the mushaf. Or if she's using her jilbab or abaya, then she can also carry it. But she's not allowed directly, like anyone else who's in a state of hadath, to touch the mushaf. But what she's not allowed is to read. نعم أخي. نعم. Touching the mushaf. No, touching the mushaf is for everyone. No, touching the mushaf, you are allowed to touch the mushaf. That's for everyone. If she's carrying it, just carrying it, not to recite. Not to recite. Not to give it to someone. The brother said if she's carrying the mushaf, if a person who is in a state of junub, is in a state of janaba, that individual, he is not directly allowed to touch the mushaf, and he's not allowed to read. But if he is wearing gloves or the mushaf is in a bag, he can carry and she can carry. Similarly, a woman who is on her haid, similarly, not directly touching it and not reading it.
I think the one that has will say that she has no power or no ability to cover that because it's meant to do it. One with the janaba, she has the ability to go on.
There are certain issues akhiya, that you are mixing. There are certain issues. Just listen, brothers. Remember what we said, and sisters also. There are certain things which are not allowed for a person who is in a state of hadath, whether that's akbar or asghar. For them, it's not allowed for them to do. And there were three things. What were they? Masal mushaf. Masal mushaf, you're not allowed on a condition. What do we mean masal mushaf? Directly. If you're wearing gloves or with a stick or is in a case, are you allowed? Yes, you're allowed. The second thing is what? As-salah. And the third is a-tawaf. Now we are coming to hadath al-akbar. We said there are how many things? Two things which are not allowed for the person who is in a state of hadath al-akbar. One is qira'atul Quran, whether it is from the mushaf or from the hifz. And also staying in the masjid. And the one who is exempt is that if they do wudu, is whom? The person who stays on the janaba. Now in terms of remember what we said, that there is no clear hadith by themselves which deny the woman from reading the Quran when she is in a state of hayd, menstruating, or postnatal bleeding. The hadith that come is a hadith which speak of person who is in a state of janaba. Some of the arguments that some of the scholars use in terms of allowing a sister who is in a state of janaba, a state of hayd, to read the Quran, they say it is not her choice. She could be 7 days in a state of menstruating, while the person who is in a state of janaba can make ghusl if they want to in the next 10 minutes, and they can go to read the Quran. So as such, we cannot deny the sister from reading the Quran without a clear proof. So there is no evidence in terms of stopping that. But the scholars like Ibn Uthaymeen rahmatullahi alayh and Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, they say it is what better khurujan, yani to leave the khilaf and the different opinions, that if the sister is a sister who is a student or a teacher and fearing that they will forget the Quran and they require, then they read it out of haja, necessity. But if there is no necessity, then it is better for her to wait and to continue to make the adhkar and other ibadat that she is allowed to do while she is in a state of hayd. One of the sisters asked, and she says, could you repeat the part you said about making wudu in a state of janaba upon entering the masjid? Could you make that clear, more clear, please? Jazakallah khair. What we said was that the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the hadith that we mentioned previously, that if the individual is in a state of hadathul akbar from janaba, not hayd, and they want to stay in the masjid, they are allowed to stay in the masjid. They are allowed to stay in the masjid on a condition, and that condition is if they make wudu like the wudu of the salah. The hadith is the hadith of the athar from Ata, where he says, Ra'aytu, I have seen. This is in Muslim. He said, Ra'aytu, I have seen. Rijalan, men. Min ashabi Rasulillah, from the companions of the Messenger of Allah. Yajlisuna fil masjid, sitting in the masjid. Wahum mujnibun, while they are in a state of janaba. إذا توضأوا, when they make wudu, wudu as-salati, like the wudu of salah. So they come out of their houses in a state of janaba, and there's a gathering or maybe or whatever, halaq al-ilm, there's the dars going on in the masjid, and they want to listen to. So they come, so what do? They make wudu, like they are going to pray. And they come and they sit in the masjid. Do they pray tahiyyat al-masjid? No. Are you sure? Yes. But what we said previously, that you're not allowed, salah becomes haram for a person who is in a state of hadath. She says, when reading the dua upon entering the toilet, is it meant to be read before placing your left foot in the door? As it is not permissible to mention Allah's name in the toilet. Yes. So you read it before you enter. This is, some of the scholars, they say you say it quietly. You don't, yes, you don't say it in terms of talaffuz. You don't say it with them, you say it inside you. And all this in terms of the toilets here that we have, they don't really take the hukum of being a toilet, because the najasa is not here, the najasa is not present. The najasa is what? It's gone. You washed it with water, and then you use the brush and everything, so it's gone, it's somewhere else, miles away. So you've got a tube there, nothing. So that's not literally toilet. Is it allowed to pray in the train while it's moving? Yes, you're allowed, inshallah, with us different lesson, inshallah, but you are allowed. Salah in everywhere, you are allowed to pray. You can pray in the plane even. In the plane. Can you please mention some of the scholars that say the ayah you mentioned regarding that the Mus'haf is only for the pure, for the scholars that say it is refers to the angels are. Inshallah bi'idhnillah, we'll mention that next time, inshallah bi'idhnillah. The scholars that say that it refers to only the Malaika. I know Ibn Hazm is one of them, but inshallah we'll mention the others bi'idhnillah in the next lesson. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسمك.